Hi everyone, I am Sandy and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my September wrap up and also I'm going to give an update on the Mookse and Gripes bucket list book tag. I had posted a list of 10 books and asked people to vote on which ones they would which ones they think I should read in 2022, and I am going to give you guys the winner today. If you're not familiar with the Mookse and Gripes bucket list book tag, it was originally created by Sean the Book Maniac, and I will leave a link in the description below for you for both my video and Sean's video, so if you want to go and take a look. It was to help promote a podcast by the same name. So I had my 10 books, which had Iliad, A Suitable Boy, Les Miserables, Dune, The Brothers Karamazov, It, War and Peace, Moby Dick, Lonesome Dove, and the Histories by Herodotus. And out of those, there was a pretty clear winner, I guess, that ended up with 10 votes on it, which is this brick of a book, which is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. What's really interesting about this one is it's called the Karamazov Brothers rather than the Brothers Karamazov, and I'm struggling with that and wondering if this translation is going to be okay. And the translator does have a note in there saying you wouldn't call it the what ones did he put in here? It says in here you wouldn't call it the Brothers Warner or the Brothers Marx. And so it's an interesting one. I'm not sure why he chose to make, or why the translator chose to make kind of the name of the novel like that. So it's interesting. But if you're familiar with this one, is this an okay translation or should I look for a different one? But The Brothers Karamazov, no matter what, will be the first book that will be in 2022. It's not the first book I'm going to read in 2022. It's just the one off the list that I'm committing to. I'm not reading that in January. And then the second one, which had 8 votes, was actually War and Peace by Tolstoy. So apparently everyone wants me to read really long Russian literature next year. So yeah, thanks for that. I do really appreciate all the votes though. So this is one that there has been some conversation about a read along. Hannah over at Hannah's Books had mentioned that. I really hope that happens because I think that would make this so much more enjoyable to read. I did have at least one person vote for this because they wanted to see the really beautiful copy again. So here's the beautiful front and the beautiful back and then the beautiful edge and then the beautiful end papers. And it really is an absolute gorgeous copy of War and Peace. But that's the actual second book that was voted. And then I do have... I had commented on Bob the Booker's video if he picked A Suitable Boy that I would read that with him. So I do have this book, and you thought the other ones were big. Whew, my goodness, this one's massive. So I do now own this. That's a big commitment, this one. But that's the other one that came in. Actually, it came in 4th. It didn't come in 3rd. This one came in 4th. The book that came in 3rd is actually Dune by Frank Herbert. And as you can see, there is a bookmark in this because I have already started reading this as part of the read-along that Steve Donahue and Matthew at Mayberry Book Club are doing. And I'm hoping to have a video this week sometime still about volume 1 or part 1 of Dune. I have made it considerably farther than my prior 3 attempts, so happy with the progress of Dune so far, and I'm enjoying it. Definitely more than the first couple times I tried to read it. So my family, by the way, keeps trying to spoil this book. It's very annoying by asking me questions like, has so-and-so done this yet? Please don't do that anymore because you kind of are spoiling it because I haven't gotten there. And both people in my household have read this. And so that is the Mookse and Gripes bucket list. So again, thank you to everyone who voted. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited about those, and maybe we'll see when I read the other ones that are on the list. It's a lot of big books though, so we'll see. For the September wrap up, I am not going to talk about all the books that I read in September. I have already talked about a number of them, and it was a very successful reading month, and made more so by some buddy reads that I had. And so those are the 3 books I'm really going to focus on today, and then just lightly touch on the other 3 that I have. And the other ones, I will leave a full list of all of the books I read in the description for you, along with the videos where I already talked about them. So if you want to go and check out those, you certainly can. It gives you an easy way to go and find those without having to search for them. But I did end up reading 6 books actually off of my 1001 book list, and all 6 of them were off of the 2021 list, which is fantastic. And that's why I'm right on track with that countdown, which very, very happy about. But the first, like I said, the September's reading month was really amazing because of the people that I got to read with in September. I have found that one-on-one buddy reads are really my favorite way of reading as far as reading a book with someone else. I have done a number of them now and have found I just love the ability to connect one-on-one as I'm reading through a book, and it has made these so incredibly enjoyable. One of these I actually read at the end of August but didn't get to talk about yet because it missed the wrap-up video that I had for the end of August. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, I did as a buddy read with Alisha at Alisha Reads and Rambles. I will leave her channel linked down below, as well as the other 2 channels that I have done buddy reads with in September. But the book that we read was Sorrowland by Soloman. And so Alisha and I kind of had a check-in every day on Instagram for this particular book, and it was really great to get to know her a little bit, and I appreciated all of her insights. And my comments, sometimes I thought it may be one thing, it turned out maybe it wasn't that, but had a great time just kind of going through that, and just learned recently that you can actually leave a voice message through Instagram. We didn't know that at the time, so it was all text messages that we were leaving back and forth. But Sorrowland, it follows a woman whose name is Vern. She's actually a young girl. She's 15 in this book, and she is escaping what can only be described as a cult, and escapes into the forest and tries to, almost immediately ends up giving birth and gives birth to twins, and is then the first part of the story is her trying to survive in the woods by herself with 2 young kids with this dark and menacing force that's kind of stalking her, and you're not sure, is this a person? Is this something supernatural? Is she a unreliable narrator? Is it something else going on? Things start to happen to her where her body is kind of changing and becoming stronger when she really realistically should be becoming weaker after living in the woods for this long. And you have that just kind of evil presence out there, and you're not sure, said, if it's a person or something, supernatural. And so there's a lot of just trying to figure out what's going on in this. And the story in the woods was actually my favorite part of the story. And I really enjoyed kind of how she was trying to get through everything and learn what her body could do. And she slowly starts to make her way back to civilization. And that's kind of where the story for me started to take just a little bit of a turn. It wasn't as this wasn't as interesting when she went back to being more part of civilization for whatever reason. And I don't want to spoil the book. It does do a pretty nice job of resolving like all the storylines, and you do find out answers to all of that, whether or not it's supernatural or if it's scientific testing or if it's an evil person or kind of what is driving all of that. That is all resolved in this. My couple of issues with the book: one, there's a pretty explicit sex scene in this that just seems incredibly out of place, and I don't have a problem with smutty scenes or sex scenes in books at all, but it just didn't fit. You didn't have it kind of all through the novel, and then all of a sudden this is there, and it's kind of as part of like this weird dream sequence or remembrance of something that happened in the past, and it felt very out of place. And then I was fine with the ending until the very, very end. And the decision that was made kind of then was where the unbelievable, even more unbelievable aspect of it came in. And for me, the ending just really unfortunately fell a little bit short. But again, I had a wonderful time reading this with Alisha, and please definitely go check out her channel if you're not familiar with her, because I really enjoy her content and her book recommendations. So, but Sorrowland by Soloman is the first buddy read. The second buddy read is a buddy read that we picked up this book after I had after I had read Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates, because I wanted to learn more about Marilyn Monroe, and I had shown this book on a book haul video, I believe, and Kari had said, I would love to read that with you. So this one is The Final Years of Marilyn Monroe, and I read this with very literary Kari. Kari has an unbelievable amount of knowledge about the Kennedys, about this time period, about a lot of the events that we actually read about in this book. And so it was absolutely a fantastic choice to get to read with Kari, because she just had so much insight around whether or not she believed some of these instances or what she thought of kind of Kennedy being in here. And we talked every day on Boxer on this, about this book. We read about, I believe, right around 40 pages a day, and really enjoyed that aspect of this book, because there were sections of it where I would ask, what are your thoughts about this, and got a different perspective than maybe what the author had did. The book itself is unfortunately not the best, and part of that is because there are typos in this book almost right from the beginning, which are very off-putting in this book. The second issue I have with this book, and then I'll go on to talk about the things I really enjoyed about the book, is the author kept inserting themselves kind of in the book, meaning they would say, I can now reveal, and I am now aware, and I know that this happened, without really citing any references in those moments when they were saying, I know this and I can reveal this. And it just gave me a level of not really trusting some of what was happening in this biography. I would have appreciated it so much more if that hadn't been part of this book, and that I could have just read about, different parts of her life without the author kind of inserting themselves in it. The ultimate takeaway of this book is around how just sad I was after reading this, how sad I was for her. She really had a very difficult beginning. The author kind of minimized some of the events that happened to her as a child as well, which I really didn't appreciate how they kind of minimized some of those, some of the things that happened to her. History of anxiety, of depression, of drug use, and she just could not get away from that. And everyone that was around her just tried to take advantage of her in one way or another, either physically, mentally, financially. She was very, very susceptible to suggestion, it seemed like. She had a very unscrupulous doctor who was prescribing her meds that had effects that would not work well together. And the doctor also embedded a housekeeper in her house who was basically a spy. Also had illegal wiretaps, as well as the FBI wiretapping her, those kinds of things. She really didn't have anyone in her corner that was just looking out for her, and she wasn't capable of making some of those decisions, it seemed like, on her own. And the only person that was really there for her was Joe DiMaggio. They were married for a time, and he really, according to this book, wanted to marry her again, and she just didn't want to be married to him. And he was apparently devastated by that. And the pictures that they have of Joe DiMaggio at the funeral, you can see just how torn up he is in this picture, and how much, according to this book, like, his last words were about Marilyn. But she as a whole was left just really very susceptible to every type of person taking advantage of her. The author also kind of minimized something that happened at the Calneva Ranch, which was pretty traumatic for her from reading it. And it's an event that Kari actually knew about, and kind of that similar kind of conversation of just kind of minimizing some of those things, this assault that basically happened to her. And that was about a week before she died. The speculation of whether or not she committed suicide or whether or not someone killed her, The book implies that it was more of an accidental overdose due to a combination of drugs in there. But there's some conversation in here too of her calling another person, and they did not rush over to help her because they thought it was a cry for attention. There's a thing in here about when she actually passed away, which was after 8, and the call to the medics, which didn't happen until I believe 3, and some implication that Bobby Kennedy came and searched for things in her house beforehand. I don't know how much of those kinds of things I believe. There's just a lot of kind of those inconsistencies in here. I wish that it would have been a little bit better a story, or so not a story because it's a biography, a little bit better way of keeping the author kind of out of it. And that really was very off-putting. And then the lack of documentation, the lack of notation on it was the other part. I had watched a video, I believe it was a Q tag that Jen over at Remembered Reads did. And she was talking about when, I think it was quality versus quantity question, but when you're reading a biography, you kind of want to read more than one version of it, or more than one book about the same person to get different perspectives. And I would say that was something I would feel like I was really missing with this. But again, I really enjoyed the read with Kari. I had so many great conversations with her over this time, and it was very, very enjoyable because of that. Even though the book was not my favorite, I enjoyed the read an incredible amount. So thank you so much, Kari, for a wonderful, wonderful buddy read. And then the last buddy read book that I'm going to talk about is actually Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. I don't own this in a physical copy. I only have it as a digital copy. This is a book that I have had for years and have not read. And I ended up reading this as a buddy read with Shelly Swearingen. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite book that I read in September. It was absolutely inspiring and harrowing and disturbing and emotional to read this book. Much as with the Marilyn Monroe biography, I got to talk to Shelly every day about this book and kind of almost feel the emotions of what we were reading at the same time together. And often our comments were, this is very harrowing story, and this is just a very difficult thing that the person had to go through, which made the read again just an incredibly enjoyable experience. There were times when we were reading it where we were going, there has to be a point where something good happens to this person, and it was just that having that kind of almost emotional support as you're going through this very difficult experience with the main character in the book, or the main focus of the book. So if you're not familiar with Unbroken, it follows someone whose name is Louis Zamperini. I think that's his name now. I'm trying to remember the last name. And it documents really his life from when he was a small child, a very difficult small child, to the point where he kind of had a turnaround and started training for the U.S. Olympic team as a runner, and thought that he would be able to break the 4-minute mile. Went to the Berlin Olympics. It says that he met Adolf Hitler, or at least shook his hand while he was in Berlin, and then was supposed to go to the Tokyo Olympics, which ended up being canceled. And then he was drafted into World War II, and he was a bombardier. Book goes into just a lot of detail about their missions. There's pictures in there where there's bullet holes in the plane, and his face is looking out in one of them. They show people that he flew with, and it goes through all of that to the point where he ends up being shot down. Actually, was he shot down, or was they were in an unreliable plane, first of all, and they end up crash landing in the ocean, and Louis and 2 other people are trying to survive on these very small life rafts, and they were on the life rafts for an exceptionally long period of time. And so it goes through all of those, and that's really where you start to kind of go, okay, there has to be something good kind of happening next. There's all of these sharks that are in the water, and it was just how it was written was so incredibly engaging, and you just cared about these people on the boat, and are trying to are they all what's going to happen to them next, and knowing that this is documenting someone's real events as well was absolutely fascinating. They end up being prisoners of war with in Japanese POW camps, and are transferred a number of times with a number of prison guards who are sadistic. And basically one of them, whose name is the Bird, tries to break Louis. And that whole experience reading that is where we were kind of almost comforting each other, going, this has to get better soon, right? This has to get, I mean, there's something has to change for poor Louis. And you know, how Laura Hillenbrand documented that whole part of the story was just incredibly moving and so well done. And not one time did she insert herself in that story. And I think it was really interesting to read both of those nonfiction books, which were essentially biographies. One was a little bit more of just a story of the entirety of Louis's life, but the two different styles, and how much I liked one and how little I liked the other one. So it was a great experience to read both of those at the same time. But if you haven't read Unbroken and are not familiar with it, it is one that I would highly recommend you pick up if you don't mind kind of those gruesome details, though, of some things that can happen as part of war, as part of being captured. And there were a lot of difficult circumstances, and the book has some very disturbing pictures in it of people who, you know, had people in the camps and things like that. And so just know that going into it, that it is a bit difficult. The content is difficult, but the writing is amazing. And it is my favorite book, like I said, that I read in September, made more enjoyable because it was a buddy read. And so again, thank you so much, Shelly Swearingen, for reading that with me, because I had an absolute blast. So all three of the lovely, lovely booktubers that I read with in September, again, thank you so much. And if you're not familiar with them, I will leave all of their channels linked in the description for you to go check out, because I learned something new or pick up new book recommendations from all three of them. And then as far as detailed descriptions, as far as what other books, I'm not going to go into these because otherwise this video will be even longer than it already is. But the book I read for my book club at work was The Mosquito Coast, which follows a character named Allie Fox. And the general consensus on the book club of this book is kind of a 4 out of 10 score. Allie Fox is a very interesting and enigmatic, I think is a good word for him, narcissistic genius who decides he wants to take his family to Honduras to live in a more utopian society. And let's just say it doesn't go well. And so there were parts of it that I really loved about this book and parts of it that I just really did not enjoy. It's not one I would say, yeah, absolutely go out and read this book. What's interesting is this TV series, if I can put my finger in the right place, this Apple Plus TV series actually has them in Mexico and not in Honduras, and it stars someone named Justin Theroux, who is the nephew of Paul Theroux, the author of the novel. So, but I understand the series is quite a bit different from the book, but it's not one that I would say I would recommend and I would go pick it out. And like I said, the general consensus of my book club at work was 4 out of 10. Kind of not the best. The next book is one that I got from Mark Nash, which is Line by Niall Bork. And this one is really, really interesting. It's one that I enjoyed the beginning way more than I enjoyed the end. I love the components where basically they are in line and they're waiting in line. There's a lot of psychology about being in line and orderly lines, and when lines become unruly and why, and kind of where are they going? They don't really know where they're going. They're just waiting, and every once in a while the line will move and then they move along with it. And then around kind of like the 3/4 mark, it takes a weird turn. And you learn a lot more about what the line is about, where they're going, or and those kinds of things. It was an interesting one. Another friend of mine read it as well when we were camping and enjoyed it. And I know where it lost me at, which was in some of the data-y kind of components of it that I didn't like as much as the stories of when they're in line. And there's also some very difficult scenes in this, some blood, torture kind of stuff in this as well. But this one was the other one. Yeah, that's the other one. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about briefly is The Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. This was a reread for me that I read as part of the humorous book club. And this particular one, I was curious when I read it whether or not I would like it as much as I did the first time I read it, because this is always, I've said this is one of my favorite books, and I really did love it up until about the last fifth of the book. And then some of it became pretty repetitive, but overall it was still absolutely hilarious. I forgot about a lot with Ignatius and how much trouble he causes people and how many difficult scenarios he gets into. But I'd still say absolutely give this one a try, especially if you're trying to read a Pulitzer and have struggled like I have. This one might be a good one to pick up because it is pretty easy to read, even though it looks like it's pretty long. I mean, this book has some pretty wide margins in it, and it didn't take long to read this one. But that is the end of my wrap up. Whew. Yeah, like I said, it was a lot of books to read in September, but the buddy reads and the group reads, I just couldn't put some books down this month. I'm so thankful that I had so many great experiences this month, from everything from Mid-Year Mystery Madness, Mid-Year Mystery Madness to Christie Fest, to the Humorous Book Club, to all the buddy reads. And so thank you so much to everyone who have participated or were running those events. It made for just an absolutely amazing September. I'm trying to make sure I'm in the right month. Absolute amazing September, and October is looking to be a pretty good month as well. So as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the channels that I have linked in the description. And until next time, everyone, thanks. Bye.